Welcome to B2B Sales Trends, the podcast dedicated to sales leaders in the B2B space, where we share conversations about innovative and successful sales transformations to keep you up to date on the latest trends. This podcast is brought to you by Global Performance Group.
Welcome yet to another fabulous episode of the B2B Sales Trends podcast, the show that brings you hacks, tips, tricks, thought leadership in the world of B2B selling. My name is Kendlbacher, and today's episode is all about a couple of really cool things. First of all, how do we win at the RFQ game? Second, how do we move from account planning into these RFQs? And then how do we align stakeholders in those complex deals that we are all working in? I have with me no other today, and I'm super excited to have Shari Begun, the VP, shall I say, of Worldwide Industrial Sales at Renaissance Electronics. Super pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
Shari, you've spent years leading global sales teams in highly complex B2B environments. Can you share a little bit about your journey and what excites you most about your work today?
Yeah. So first of all, I've done just about every sales role there is, everywhere from what I call, discovery to rest of world customers, the people who do no business. I've been a global account manager, a regional sales manager, a country manager, and now run a worldwide team. And that's all I've done my career is just sales, and I love it. I started in electrical engineering and realized pretty late in there that I didn't like engineering, but I found out about these amazing business roles that you had to have a technical background, and took a leap of faith in sales. But I'll say the two things that I absolutely love about what I do, the first has been consistent in my career. I love solving tough customer problems. And when you solve tough customer problems, that turns into revenue and profit. It never gets old winning business. Something that's really developed, I would say, over the last 10 to 15 years as I've taken bigger leadership roles is I absolutely love mentoring, sponsoring, promoting, and seeing people grow. And I'll give you one example. When I worked at a prior company, they had a new college graduate program, and they would assign a mentor. They didn't work directly for the person, but you mentored a person throughout their year of training. Well, that person and I, after I was his mentor, just kept the relationship up. We were at the same company. I left, moved on to a different company, and years later, he was unhappy. And I sponsored him to come in my company. He didn't work for me, but got a job there, did a great job. And fast forward 2 years ago, he was on my team at my company. And I got to re-promote him to a director. And just meeting him 2 weeks out of college to now he's over 10 years in his career. He's married with 3 kids. And it's just been an amazing experience that I've been a part of that journey. So
that's really lovely to hear, and it's a testament to your mentorship and your focus on creating good relationships. From what it sounds like, that's a really nice example. Fantastic. I love what you said earlier about what attracted you from really an engineering background, which really should be the headline for any sort of sales type of role or sales approach is solving the tough customer problem, as you refer to it, right? If anybody could think about sales just in that way, that's half of the rent, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right. I want to talk a little bit about RFQs. I know you and your role and your teams have to deal a lot with that, and you have extensive experience, should I say, in the area. And, my experience is that by the time an RFQ is released, sales teams often feel like they're reacting rather than shaping the deal. In your experience, what is the best way of how sales teams can get ahead of the process, influence the requirements before the thing is written or is released or is coming out?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things, and I'll start with like the goal. The goal should be when you get an RFQ that it's exactly what you have to offer. Easier said than done, but that
That's
needs to
true.
be what the goal is getting close to
Yeah,
that. Now, having said that, I'll kind of break it down into three things. One is you got to know the RFQ actual cycle time and key
mm,
milestones. In my world, that's anywhere from to close a piece of business. It could
right.
close in 6 months. It could take 3 years in my
Mm,
world. So you got to know that. And what things does the customer need to see along the way? Um,
right.
uh, Second is like because we're doing technology with customers who are designing electronics products, what are you having roadmap conversations with them? And a lot of times that's outside. Our normal customer is a hardware design engineer and a supply chain person. But are we
Mhm.
having discussions with CTO organizations, with general managers of business groups, their marketing people, CEO, of what their product line is going to look like 3 to 5 years from now? And
Sure.
then we're bringing in people outside the sales team. In my world, it's sometimes design engineers, it's sometimes packaging engineers that we're talking to them about, hey, we know how to do this, and we're
Mm,
brainstorming ideas. And then lastly, I would say from getting ahead of that RFQ, when you know the customer, you know their problems, a lot of times you're working with customers who are in the same market and you keep hearing themes of similar problems, that might be a place to focus. I don't advocate at all sharing proprietary information, but a
sure.
lot of times as sales teams are calling on similar types customers, is there a process internally that you're sharing trends, issues that are coming up? So, you're developing stuff behind the scenes that are solving those problems. So just like to summarize it, it's, knowing that RFQ cycle and timing and milestones. Two, roadmap conversations. And then lastly, are you as an organization kind of watching trends on your own?
I want to dive a little bit into this roadmap conversations, this cycle time, sort of all sort of interconnected from where I'm sitting, and account planning and planning for those, or strategic account planning, should I say, is part of that too. Really about how do we understand the needs of the customer far in advance of the buying decision, of course. What, in your opinion, does great account planning look like, and how does it help sales teams to really stay ahead of the RFQ process, I guess?
Yeah, so I'll start with I think great account planning exposes what you don't know about
Mm,
the customer and it leads to questions. And I would say a world class sales team isn't intimidated by that. They take on the challenge and they go find it out because a lot of, especially with global customers, it's putting puzzle pieces together. You don't get all the information in one meeting. So I'll start with that is being comfortable that you may not know everything or things are going to change and being open to asking a lot of questions. And I would say also verify that with many people at the customer. I a lot of times will hear people when I'm in, strategy reviews internally, and they'll go, "Oh, so and so said it's this." And I'm like, "Oh, when did we find that out? Oh, 4 months ago." And it's like, did we talk to anybody else at the customer? Have we re-verified it? So that's one thing. The second in account planning is I always like to say, where's the money? Like, where does our customer ship the most products so we can grow our revenue the biggest? I mean, it's great to get in a small, small win, but we're after how do we maximize our revenue? On that. And then who touches that at the customer? Like a lot of times it's not one person making that decision. So, doing a relationship map of who at the customer, who at our company can help. With that understanding, forming relationships. And then the other part of account planning, depending on the customer in that RFQ cycle, is there a regular cadence that the worldwide team is getting together and really re-verifying, did we answer those questions we didn't know? Did everybody on the team ask those questions, and did we get the same answer? Did we get different answers? Do we need to go back and reconfirm? I'll give you an example of account planning just where, business was going up and to the right, but there was more to have. I had started a new job. I was running a territory, and I started looking at the numbers, and there was a huge customer in the Bay Area, California, that I knew I wanted us to work with, and I thought it would be a good match. We were doing sub $1 million with them, which $1 million is great, but I knew my competitors were doing tens of millions, and some of them even hundreds of millions. So I asked the sales guy, I said, what do we sell to them? What product line are we in? And he goes, we're killing it. We're doing 2 million units a year, almost $1 million in revenue. And I knew that customer shipped over 20 million units. And just through questions and finding out, we were in the highest end SKU that they had. So I educated him on what I knew from a prior life. He went and asked questions, and we learned over time what we had won could go to a more broader of their product line at our customer. And I'm proud to say that that customer now is about a $10 million customer for us, from just being comfortable that though business was up, there was a lot more to win there, and being curious and asking questions and meeting all the people that touch those other SKUs and taking what we learned and taking that across the company.
It's interesting, always being curious and having the courage even to sort of get out of your comfort zone to say, we've got to challenge the customer again to see what other problems can we fix. There is this piece that I really like, this idea of how can we anticipate future issues, and how do we have a conversation about problems that don't exist now, but they're coming down the line and will come up. So how do we have these conversations early? A really cool example. Thank you for sharing. And of course, when you talk about the account planning piece, one of the issues these days is that the stakeholder environment is just extremely complex, right? You're not just selling to one person. You are aligned with, or you have to align, shall I say, with multiple stakeholders. Everybody has a different set of needs. Everyone has a different set of desire. You have to make sure you really engage every single function, geography, role. And there are some stakeholders that you're more comfortable engaging with, right? And some people are more comfortable talking to the technical buyer. Some people are more comfortable talking to the financial buyer and what have you in terms of stakeholders. What are some of the best practices for engaging and mapping out stakeholders
Okay.
to ensure that all sort of players are engaged early in that process?
So, depending on the company you work at, I work at a very large company where there's a lot of different experts. I'd say the first thing is to get comfortable with these big deals. I've yet to see a lone wolf win them. It takes a team of people to win it. So, I'm more of a big picture person in understanding the puzzle pieces rather than weigh in the details. If it's a technical meeting and maybe you can't go as deep, who at your company can get in front of that and will do an amazing job on that. So I think when you're comfortable with that team approach and putting the best person on your team in front of that customer in that moment, and you're behind the scenes orchestrating, this is what they need to hear, this is how we should present it, those type of things, but you're letting other people of the team, I think that's one thing of doing. Secondly, that learning from just the market and other customers. Like, for instance, the world I'm in right now, we had a supply chain crisis during the pandemic. There's a lot of geopolitical concerns that they want their manufacturing, some in China, but outside of China. So if I'm not hearing that at a customer, I should probably bring that up and make sure we address it. Even though that stakeholder isn't saying it, I'm seeing that trend everywhere. So, making sure that I'm up to speed with our corporate government people that are working with different governments about tariffs, that our supply chain, that I understand for that product, where it's built around the world. So I have that ready, even though it hasn't been brought up yet at a customer. So, I guess my point is on this is being comfortable of having other people help you close a deal. I think the other thing I like to do is I verify a lot when I'm in customers. I'll say stuff like I'll say, who's involved in this design? And they'll go, John, Peggy, Sue, and then I'll go, well, who else? Who else? Sometimes just asking the same question a third time in a meeting as you're weaving it in, you'll go, oh, we left off so-and-so. So just back to that being curious and verifying and having the team around the world, asking the same questions. We've had designs that were going on in California, Texas, Taiwan, Japan, all at the same time. And that's tough to do. And you got to make sure you have people in each of those locations calling on the sites.
Right. So it's really important to have the team aligned to make sure everybody has a role assigned to, and they're all sort of pulling in the right direction with this. And very interesting. I want to shift gears a little bit because I remember when we not long ago we had a pre-meeting to this recording, and you mentioned quite a bit about pricing pressure and how people handling it, and that it's so important for client-facing people, customer-facing people to win on more than just price. And pricing pressure is always affecting competitive deals. There's no doubt about it. But you've mentioned that sometimes competitors are lowballing to an extreme level. So how do you equip your sales teams to defend value and really differentiate beyond price?
So I think there's a couple things. One is just that whole account planning process of having roadmap discussions and that your customer knows you can solve complex things. If you're having those regular discussions, pricing pressures may come up, but you're a valued consultant. You're an extension of them. So that's one thing. Knowing how your customer uses your product, are they using a piece of it or are they using all of it? I think is really important because, sometimes you might be getting a premium price, but they're only using 50% of what you're adding. What your product delivers, and that could be a place that there's some sensitivity that you need to think about. Another thing I see in our industry is we work with design engineers. There's a lot of ways to solve a problem. So we may have, like a microprocessor on a board, and our competitor has what appears to be the same thing to a buyer, but we're getting rid of 3 or 4 other chips on there, and that's knowing how your customer's using it. So if you do what you think is an apples to apples comparison, you're actually saving them a whole system cost. So being able to articulate what you're doing, I think is important. Another thing, like, are there services you can bundle with it that really don't cost your company a lot of money, but it makes it kind of stickier? I'll give you an example. Is there training you can do for them that maybe you don't charge for? You charge a nominal fee of you're constantly a couple times a year going in there training engineers. Maybe there's some software you're writing for them that they get to save a half of an engineer's time because you're doing it for them. Maybe you're holding some inventory for them. So there's a lot of different things you can do that makes that relationship very hard to unwind if pricing pressure does come in. And then lastly, this one's a little controversial, but there have been times in my career that I've seen trends going and I've known that customer maybe was only using 50% of that offering and I did some proactive price reductions. Not what my competitor is maybe going to do, but a little bit. So maybe you're less off the radar. They got their goals from you for the year and everybody's happy. And so when that competitor comes in, they don't even take the call. So that one's a little tricky because you are depleting your current revenue. But the way I like to say it, it's better you eat your own lunch than someone else eat it for you. So, thinking about it. So those are a few things. And one last one. Are you just having regular business reviews with your customer?
Right.
And during those times, reminding them when it isn't under pricing pressure. And I'll give you an example. We have customers all the time that they get an order from their customer and they need to ship before the end of the quarter. They need to manufacture something and ship. And we may have a dollar chip on their board and they're selling a $10 million system. And there's been plenty of times that we have a 12-week lead time. A customer comes to us and they're like, we need this in 6 weeks. We make it happen. And they get tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And we might have only gotten, 100,000 in revenue, but we made something happen for them. Reminding them all the time of those things in a very nice way of how, as a partnership, they had a problem. Yeah. We solved it. They made a lot of money, and we didn't charge them any type of expedite fees, and all those things you can articulate into real dollars. Yeah, we're maybe not saving you $10,000 or $100,000 on this RFQ, but we got you an extra $5 million in profit this year.
Yeah. It's so interesting, the little things that, and we're not suggesting to give things away for free all the time, but it's really, really important that a relationship is a give and take. And yes, sometimes you have to give a little bit here and there too, and highlight then how you can help them in their outcome, that what they're needing to achieve. So I think that's a really nice example. I was fascinated in our pre-deal that by the amount of deals and the sizes of the deals that you have closed and finalized over the years. I think you even mentioned you've closed billion-dollar deals, which takes my breath away, which is fabulous. What are some of the, for our audience and keen listeners here, what are some of the key takeaways from managing these long and complex sales cycles? And what advice would you give to sales teams who face similar challenges and want to close similar sized deals, by the way?
Yeah. So first of all, I was lucky enough, it was probably now over 15 years ago. I got to work with a professional negotiation coach for 2 years. My company actually had him on retainer. And I still use a lot of the kind of fundamentals I learned from him. And one of the things he always said in going into deals was, think with the customer, what does the customer want to get out of this? And really understand their pain points on it. And once you know that, then you can decide, do we have something to offer, and what do we want to get out of that? But if you always put it in your world, you're never going to solve those tough customer problems. So it sounds simple, but I always think about before every meeting, every RFQ, every complex deal, what does the customer, and can I solve that problem? And knowing that now, what's a win for me? And have that at top of mind. Second is listening and asking questions more than pitching, because that's discovering all the obstacles along the way. And then we talked about early on that RFQ cycle of some of my deals have taken like a year and a half to close. And that can get really defeating, during it. So explaining to your stakeholders early on, that team that's supporting you, before you ever start it, this is the RFQ cycle. These are the milestones that are going to happen up front, and reminding them. And I'll kind of think of when you're on an airplane, when the pilot tells you 15 minutes we might have turbulence, you're not really that scared. If you're sitting there and the plane does this. So I think of just knowing there's going to be times that are going to be challenging in my world. If they're not asking technical questions, if we're not having meetings with legal on those billion-dollar deals, if things aren't getting heated, it's probably not moving in the right direction. So being okay with that, back to what you said earlier, being uncomfortable. And the one thing he also taught was, one, You can't have your life dependent on one deal. You have to have a couple things going on, and you can't have your happiness based on that deal. So no matter what happens during these times, whether it's at the customer or it's internal, we're going to stay calm. We're going to stay focused. We're going to go back to the basics. What does the customer want to get out of that? What do we want to get out of this? And take a breather, sometimes a day, to respond to something so you're not emotional and it's with solving that tough customer problem. So it was a book called Start With No, and I absolutely loved it, and I loved working with, his name was Jim Camp. It was just an amazing experience that really had changed how I approach deals.
It's interesting, and you've answered my last question already when I typically ask what are the top 3 skills and qualities of elite salespeople, and you've shared all of those already. That's fabulous. And if I can just summarize what you just said in my own words a little bit, thinking about the outcomes that the customer needs to achieve and help them to achieve that. So really thinking about what they want to get out of it and what their outcomes is that they need to create. Asking good questions, good listening. I love the idea of explaining and sort of road mapping different cycles and what to expect going forward. And then don't put all your eggs in one basket, and don't have your mental health also depend on one deal. I really like that. That's great. Shari, thank you. This was awesome sharing of information, sharing of insights. I know our listeners will very much appreciate your tips and tricks and thought leadership. And it's amazing to me, you're closing these hundreds of millions of dollar deals, and the principles and the behaviors are very similar to smaller deals, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I think all of those things can apply to no matter what you're doing.
Right.
And whether it's a tiny customer, it's a big customer, it's small deals, it's huge deals, it's just having a basic process in place.
And I always say, it's not good enough to just understand that process that you have just referred to intellectually, because that's one thing, right? I get it. I understand it. I get it in my head. But it's another thing to really execute it with confidence and courage at the point where we talk to our customers and prospects. I think that's really key.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say, it's top 3 traits. I also put creativity in there is a really important one of, like really stepping back and thinking through things and no matter how crazy of an idea or it didn't work before, like try it again. Sometimes just being creative and throwing something out there works. And that I've had it work in small customers too.
Absolutely. Shari, thank you. I think that was awesome. Your thought leadership, your input was fabulous, and our listeners will love to hear those tips and tricks that you have shared. And we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
My lovely listeners, 2 calls to action. Go to the B2B Sales Trends.com website, share this wonderful episode or others with people who you think might benefit from the great learnings on here. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. We want to share it with the community, and we want to make the B2B sales world a better place for people with top elite skills. Look after yourselves. Happy selling, and until the next episode. Bye-bye.